So we had a phase 1 clinical trial investigating a CD22-directed CAR-T cell therapy for patients who had predominantly relapsed after CAR-19. We have completed enrollment. We now have 38 patients treated. We actually had 2 different dosing levels, and long story short is the higher dose was more toxic and no more efficacious. So we actually have gone down to what we like as the recommended phase 2 dose of 1 million CAR-positive cells per kilogram. And at that dose, all but one of those patients, so 28 out of 29, had relapsed after a prior CAR-19. The overall response rate in that cohort was 66%, which is a 53% CR rate, which is pretty remarkable for patients who've already had a prior CAR. And what was astounding is those CRs were durable. We've had very few patients relapse after achieving a CR on the trial. So 17 out of 20 patients with a median follow-up of over 22 months have retained their complete response rate. So that's very exciting. Hopefully we're curing these folks. But it's a high-risk population. Having gone through prior CARs, those patients come in a little sicker. They have more problems with infections, lower blood counts. So it's a bit of a challenging patient population, but fortunately this CAR is fairly safe. We'll get into this probably later in the interview about the rates of neurotox and CRS, but overall it was a pretty safe CAR despite having these higher risk patients. We actually didn't see any grade 3 or higher CRS or neurotox at the recommended phase 2 dose. So overall it's pretty safe. What was unique about this CAR is there often were in about 40% of patients having 2 waves of an inflammatory state. The first one appeared to be like CRS, and then the second wave was either like CRS or this newer entity called immune effector cell HLH-like syndrome, or IECHS. So we had 5 patients who required treatment for this newer entity during that second wave of inflammation. So we've had to actually develop treatment strategies for that, and largely using steroids and anakinra mitigated that new entity, so we kind of had to figure out how to treat it. But we saw only 5 patients get neurotoxicity, and all of those were grade 1 or 2. Really didn't require any intervention, and it resolved within about a day in most cases, and 1 patient took 2 days. So largely not a problem with this CAR. CRS treated sort of in a standard way with tocilizumab and steroids. But since we didn't see a lot of grade 3 or higher, it was actually fairly easy to manage. Very few patients required ICU care, and compared to some of the CD19 CARs that these patients had experienced, they were sort of generally happier that it wasn't as much trouble. The CD22 CAR therapy, we've wrapped up the phase 1 trial, and we're about to open a multi-center phase 2 trial. That's going to be an industry-sponsored trial, but it'll be throughout, I think, 25 centers. That should open hopefully by July or August of 2023. So if patients are interested, they can certainly go to clinicaltrials.gov and look up the CD22 CAR and reach out to a center if they're interested.